As somebody who's been in and around theater for a long time, the stories of John Kenley actually are famous. The rumors about John Kenley, the people would say who had worked with John Kenley, the magic that he created with his theaters in Ohio, really are kind of the stuff of legend. Here's somebody ready to tell the story of this unique human being. I'm on board for that.
This role is really the role of a lifetime. I get to tell a story, an incredible story about living authentically, about gender, figuring out your own identity, accepting and loving yourself and who you are. And the style of the show is as if it's a classic golden age musical. So I feel like I get to play Mame, Dolly Levi, all the great parts I could ever have wanted, playing John, who is also Gene Kenley.
It's always interesting to me to be introduced to in a sense, our transcestors. And, you know, Kenley is someone whose situation is very complicated. And, well, I say complicated, but more complicated to society than I believe to Kenley. And I think being able to tell these stories from a truthful and beautiful place have the possibility or the potential to help people learn so much more about just people as a whole.
Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome to the latest and last edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. I want to thank everyone who has shown up for these shows that I started doing as a result of COVID, but now I'm anxious to get back on the stage myself, so we're going to wrap everything up today. But as I do with every show, I always ask my audiences, who or what are you celebrating today? And I believe there's so much to celebrate if we take the time to do so. And there's so much that I want to celebrate today. First of all, I would like to celebrate Carol Giroux, the publicist at Goodspeed Musicals, who invited me up last Saturday night to see this incredible new musical called A Complicated Woman. And we are so lucky today because we have the man who made these characters sing on stage, and that's Jonathan Brielle. And you've been on the show before, so it's great to have you back, and congratulations on a great show.
Thank you, Richard, and it's great to be back, and thank you for having me. And it's, you know, watching the, talk about being grateful, watching that the opening interviews with some of our cast members, I'm so grateful for the people involved with this show who just make it sing. So it's I have a lot to be thankful for today as well.
Well, I am very, as you know, from being on the show before, I'm very interested in process and how things come to be. And I want to talk about the trajectory of the very beginning for you up to this point where we are now, and then where we're going to go from now. How did you first hear about this project? I know that I had Jeff Calhoun on the show probably about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And he first mentioned to me that he was doing, that he was working on this project, celebrating Gene Kenley. And I was very excited because those of you who know me and my involvement with Dolly, and John Kenley did 2 productions of Dolly. Here he is with Ann Miller. And he also did a production with Betty White. So how did you first hear about this project, and what convinced you to say yes?
Well, Jeff and I were going to be working on another show of mine, and we had just started that dialogue. And going back to 2005, Jeff Calhoun had co-directed himself and Nora at the Old Globe, which was an earlier show of mine. And so we had been talking about, getting together and doing something again. And so we talked about my other show, Nightmare Alley, and we were about to get started on it. And then he sent me a documentary that he had made about John Kenley, because Jeff, and I don't know what detail Jeff went into with you, but Mr. Kenley, as Jeff knew them by, had hired Jeff as a 16-year-old dancer, And it was there that Jeff met Tommy Toon, and Mr. Kenley really changed their life. And Jeff shared with me, well, let me go in order here. So on John Kenley's 90th birthday, they had a big party in New York, and Jeff wound up being the last one there. And Jeff sat down with Mr. Kenley and said, "So are the rumors true?" And Mr. Kenley proceeded to tell Jeff, and by the way, I keep saying Mr. Kenley when I'm referring to how Jeff knew Mr. Kenley. Internally, we call them Jay. But in any event, proceeded to tell Jeff the story of Gene and asked Jeff to please tell their story. The next
Well,
day,
can I interrupt for just a moment? Do you mind? I want to go back for the listeners who may not know. When he went to him, and I would have given anything to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation, by the way. But when he went back and asked, were the rumors true? If you can take us back and let people know what those rumors were.
well, frankly, it's a great question. We even have a character represented in the show representing Jeff, if you will. They're a young actor who talks to who they know as Mr. Kenley towards the end of the show. And there were a couple of actors who knew that Mr. Kenley led a double life. And people really didn't know much more than that, except for one or two people. And one was an agent, and the other name will come to me in a moment. But there were really only two people who knew for sure that there was John and Gene Kenley. And what was so amazing was that they had two separate driver's licenses. John never lent money to Gene, and Gene never lent money to John. They had two very separate lives. And so I always inferred that Jeff, by asking that question, was asking, were those rumors true that they led a double life? And proceeded to tell Jeff the story of Gene, and the next day delivered to Jeff's doorman an unpublished biography of Gene Kenley. With that, Jeff took himself to film school, decided to create a documentary, because that's how he thought he was going to first tell Mr. Kenley's story. Unfortunately, the family did not want Jeff to interview Jay. And so Jeff was only able to get people who knew Mr. Kenley. No one that they interviewed really knew Gene. And so created this 24-minute documentary that it's not been released, but Jeff shared it with me. And so I watched the documentary. I called Jeff up and I said, "You know, this is a musical, right?" And Jeff said, "I was hoping you'd say that." And I knew that, even though I write book music and lyrics, I knew I wasn't the right book writer for this. And that to be authentic, we needed somebody from either the transgender community or, we needed to be authentic. And so we first went to a fellow named Sam Salmond, and I thought Sam was going to be a book writer, but Sam didn't feel that they were the right person either. We wound up writing a couple of songs together for the show, but then Sam introduced us to Ian Field Stewart. And I watched a YouTube video of Ian, who is a Black trans feminine poet who is brilliant. And they were 25 at the time. And I was just, this is a really brilliant person. And so we started the process. And being very fortunate to being the creator on behalf of the Johnny Mercer Foundation of the Johnny Mercer Writers Grove at Goodspeed Musicals, I brought it up as my project to work on, because we, at 4 weeks of every year, we bring up about, I don't know, about 15 shows. Each show gets a house, and at night we do a salon. So this was my project that I worked on for 2 seasons at the Writers Grove, at the Johnny Mercer Writers Grove. And so it was really, I'd say half the show was written here on campus. I happen to be in Chester right now, where you're interviewing me, because production is just 2 miles down the road. So with that, we spent, two groves together over 2 years. Jeff would come up and spend the time with us. And then just before COVID, literally a week before COVID, we did a reading in New York at, and we had done it, let's see, I'm trying to think. We had done a table read before that, a very impromptu. And initially the structure was different. We had, based on, it was starting at Mr. Kenley's 90th birthday and looking back over their life. So the character was split in 2. So we had an older or mature, we grew to call them the mature Kenley. And then we had the young Kenley. And we did a reading 2 weeks before COVID hit, and it was very good. And everybody got very excited about it. And then COVID hit. And so we all went into hibernation for a bit. And then this past December, we did a reading of it in New York, again, splitting the character, and came to the conclusion that we didn't want to do that anymore. And that we wanted to have a show to follow one person, because it's easy to cheat character development when you zoom in to different parts of their life. You can leave things out and somehow it feels a little less personal, and to an audience in our belief. Mm-hmm. And so we made a decision to eliminate 2 characters, which were splitting Kenley into 2. And we also had Kenley's sister, who had a daughter, which became the niece. We decided there was just going to be the sister. So process is a good thing. You get to hear. Absolutely. You get to hear, you get to see. And guess what? Audience is the last collaborator, which is what's so wonderful about being here at the Terrace Theater as part of Goodspeed, because they allow you to keep working on the show. And sometimes when you're so inside of a show, you can't see the forest from the trees. There's things that you accept in your own mind's eye that someone else goes, what are you talking about? And you watch the audience and you get reaction and you talk to people and you go, oh, that wasn't clear. Let me take care of that. And so that's the part of the process that we're in now. I would say we are 95% there. But it's that 5% that is kind of important. I think audiences are enjoying it. It's fascinating seeing the different audiences come in. We have people from the community that come in and are just hooting and hollering from the opening, to people who this is a window into a world in which they know not. And so there is a bit of caution on their behalf.
Well, I
But
want to talk about that for just a moment because,
sure,
first of all, I want to commend everyone involved with this because not only are you telling the story of a man, let's face it, that most people, unless you're in the theater and part of that world, would probably not know anything about. But his story, her story, I want to be very careful with my pronouns. So if I do anything,
it's there, to be safe, it's there.
it's there. Great.
Well, and by the way, Mr. Kenley, however, would not have done that.
Well,
And
it was a different time also, but I wanted to go back to what I wanted to say was that I really commend everyone involved with this for using this as an educational tool. There was a talk session in the lobby after the show on Saturday night of last week. Unfortunately, it was already 10:30, and I had to get back into the city, so I wasn't able to stick around. But I heard just a snippet of someone was having a conversation with someone, and I was eavesdropping, and he said that when he first read the script, and I don't know who this was, by the way, that he hated on paper the character of Myrtle, which of course is played by Clea Blackhurst in the show. But once he saw this show on its feet with what Myrtle brings to that story, because Myrtle is like an every woman, if you will, of a lot of people who probably have the same concerns and fears and phobias that Myrtle had, with this being so close in her own backyard. But I wanted to go back to when Jean was born. They were the phrase was intersex.
right.
Is that phrase still used today?
Yes.
Okay.
It used to, in the old days, it was hermaphrodite.
Exactly. Right. So
Right.
the family made the decision to raise Jean as John.
Correct.
Based on the research that you've done with Jeff and everything, at what point did Jean have the courage to start leading this double life?
Well, as far as we can tell, and by the way, Ian has done so much of the research as well, and as much as we could tell from the biography is sort of a diary more than a biography. It's kind of anecdotal stories here and there. It's not really chronological. It's somebody remembering things. When Jay left and moved to New York, I think they began to feel comfortable to outwardly be begin to lead the double life. And part of our story is that New York, as John became recognized by the Schubert organization, New York started to feel a little small. And however, with that said, we've compressed time a great deal. The thing that is fascinating is that John Kenley also served in the Merchant Marine. And there was, exceptional people are exceptional people. And they were talented, incredibly smart, could type 150 words a minute. That's nothing to shake a stick at. That's a lot. And they were just incredibly bright. And I think whatever situation they were in, if you were, had your phobias about whatever Jay might have been, they, I think, got overlooked because of their talent and ability and personality and good cheer, if you will. So all of that combined, got them through some really interesting situations. And, you know, if you were to make this stuff up, people wouldn't believe you, you know?
Exactly. And I mean, then there's the other element. Jay lived to be 103.
Great.
So how do you compress uh, a lifetime into 2.5 hours? And I'd like you to address that, if you don't mind, in terms of the characters that help to tell this story.
Well, a lot of that has to do with Ian and how Ian approached the story. She was very upfront with us at the very beginning that, you know, being a Black writer, it was very important to her that although it might not have been historically correct, that we knew that Jean had a best friend as a sex worker. We didn't know who this friend was. We knew certain feelings they had about them, but we didn't know who the actual person was. And it was very important to Ian that this be a transgender Black person. And by the way, the world was different when we first started this. It wasn't like, oh, let's do something au courant. You know, this was not what this was about.
I know. It's just amazing your timing on this.
Well, you know, sometimes the fates smile on you. You know, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And because this was in 2015 or 2016, and we just had such, like Kenley being special, we believed Ian was very special. And we decided that we wanted to go on this ride with her.
And how did you find her?
That was through Sam Salmond.
Okay.
And I will say what's really interesting is that the three of us are all represented in some way on the stage. And not literally, but metaphorically in points of view and how we've grown and how we've changed. The three of us have really changed by working on this together. Ian, you know, has become like a daughter to me. We're very close, and it's been cool. It's, you know, you do. I do things in life that I learn from and I grow from, and boy, this has been at the top of my list, I'll tell you.
I can only imagine. You mentioned earlier that you said to Jeff, this is a musical. When that seed began, did you begin to write the music, or did that begin to happen once you had Ian in place?
I never, for me, book is everything. And it doesn't matter how great the song is, how great your singer is, your actor is. If you don't care where you are in that moment, it's boring. It's what makes it different. Musical is different than a concert, which each song is its own little play. But in theater, it's always context. What's the context of that song? And if you can make it invisible, the connection, so that the song is just a heightened place of the scene, or where the scene had to go, then I feel like I'm doing my job.
Sammy Kahn, you know, who wrote with so many different writers, he said when he was asked which comes first, the music or the lyrics, his response was always the paycheck.
No, I always thought it was the phone call.
The phone call. The phone call. So, and you're doing it all. I mean, what is your process? I mean, as you're reading the script, do certain things pop out at you and you go, this is where this song belongs? I mean, I know that the show is still very much a work in progress, and that fascinates me. And you said something earlier, and not only is it true of new works, but it is also true of older works. Like right now, on the Goodspeed Opera stage is The Mystery of Edwin Drood. The rehearsal time that is given and allotted to these productions is unprecedented anywhere else in this country. I don't think this happens.
Well, Goodspeed is an unusual place. And Donna Lynn Hilton is an amazing artistic director. We've been good friends now for a dozen years. And she had been part of Goodspeed and for, a long time. I think it's at least 20 years. And she's been artistic director here at least 5 years, 6 years. I can't even remember. It's interesting in terms of new development. They've always been on that track, but somehow I think the Writers' Grove gave them an insight to the beginnings of things. I know, for example, Donna Lynn was very involved with NAMPT for many years, so they would see things as they had been written and needed to, be heard for the first time. But what the Grove does is start from scratch sometimes. And for example, Private Jones, which was here last year by an incredibly talented writer named Marshall Pallet, who I was there when he wrote the first act, and he'd come in every night to the Grove and he'd play another song and read another scene. And what's cool about the Grove is that this is not a mentorship program. This is a colleague to colleague program. It's unlike anything else anywhere.
So was it always going to be Goodspeed where this was going to be the starting point?
No, but I had a conversation with Donna Lynn, and I knew that she has dedicated herself a great deal to expanding what the Goodspeed's mission is. Mm-hmm. And being aware that was her goal. She knows a bunch of my shows, but I said to her, this could be a right show for you. And I walk an interesting balance between representing the Johnny Mercer Foundation and not being self-serving and not, I don't bring things to the Grove. Oh, maybe we can get produced here. It's not like that. And the Grove isn't meant to be an audition for anything. It's meant to honestly nurture new work. And, but it just so happened that this was a piece that was right. And I knew it was right, and Donna Lynn saw it was right. And because I've done many other productions in the last 12 years and haven't even thought of having that conversation here. And until I knew this was a good fit.
And were you hands-on with the casting process? The cast is phenomenal, by the way.
Cast is amazing. So here's another interesting tidbit. This was, Ian is at home with his community. And so, Ian introduced us to El Morgan originally, and who was just an amazing actor, singer, artist, just an incredible person. Nora Bridget Monahan, who plays Kenley, I met because they're a writer as well. And in 2014, I think it was, at a Grove, they were working on a project. And at night, we present our material for each other, and I watched them present a song. And my jaw dropped, and I was like,
Eureka, this is it.
No, this is before I was even writing.
Wow.
It's 2 years before it was even an idea to do this. And I just thought, my God, there's a Shakespearean trained actor who sings like an angel. And knows dramaturgy and is a book writer. And I was like, all right, let me file that one. And in 2016 became the assistant director on Himself and Nora at the Minetta Lane. So our star was our assistant director in another show of mine.
Great.
And so as we're getting closer and we're trying to think, who's going to play Kenley? Who's going to play? And then it just became clear. And so, we've had Jeff knew Clea, and I didn't know Clea, and I didn't know Clea's work, much to my own embarrassment.
I'm such a fan.
Yeah. Well, so here's what happened. So Jeff told me about Clea. I Googled her and watched a YouTube video, and I went, "There's Myrtle," and I wrote the song in the second act for her. After seeing her perform, I was like, I know how to do this. And so that song was just written in January up here. I wrote that song for her to sing.
And in the wrong hands, as I said earlier, she's walking such a tightrope because you've got to find the humanity in her.
Yep.
And where she's coming from in terms of how she is responding to this. In my 63 years on this planet, this is my psychological moment for the show. We are all, every one of us, a product of everything that's brought us to this moment. And how we process things, how we respond to things, all of that comes through where we've come from. And there's such... I mean, I don't want to give away too much, but at the end, when the letter is happening, that's all I'm going to say about that. I was a basket case. I mean, the tears were just flowing. And it was just and the way it was staged and the way it was put together on stage was just such a moving, pivotal moment. So kudos to everybody.
Well, it was interesting. That exact ending was found and inspired. We knew what those elements were, but Jeff really figured out how to make all of that work. And I don't want the listeners to think, oh my God, this is a really sad piece. This is really a fun.
No, it's funny. It is upbeat. I mean, the songs are. We're going to end with another one of your songs, so they'll get a snippet of it. It truly is what when you go to the theater. To me, there are so many what I call angst musicals right now, where every song is about angst, and that's not this show at all. I mean, it's just.
Well, it wasn't Kenley.
No, and it's such a celebration. I know that the family did not want that documentary to move forward. Where is the family as far as the musical is concerned?
Well, everything that we've used is based on information that's in the public right now. So because they were a public figure, we have taken that information and coalesced it into, so it's not based on the documentary, it's not based on the diary, it's based on information that we were able to glean that's available in the public. And including in some of their own, information that the family put out. So we hope that by the respectful way, and by the way, Jeff loves the family. Mm-hmm. And so that was always a tightrope for us to walk, to make it something that they would all be proud of and that they would feel good about. And that's our goal. Aside from, Jeff will always joke around and say, no, his goal is commercial theater and doing something that's meaningful. But this is I've never heard Jeff say these words before. He said, in all of his career, this has been the most meaningful project for him because of a promise that he made to Mr. Kenley. That he would tell the story.
How familiar were you with Kenley before you got involved?
I wasn't, but I'm always game for that. In 1996, when Len Cariou said to me, would you be interested in writing about James Joyce? I'd never read Joyce. So I like my research and I love learning.
Well,
And
I mean, what was your research on Kenley? Did you uh, really expand your knowledge on his life and career, their life and career,
right.
and moving on beyond what is being presented to you in the confines of a complicated woman?
Well, so just so you understand, our process is that we all gather and we talk about what we're going to write. And then I'll say to Ian, all right, if you give me this, this, and this, I can then, write the song. So just give me the scene. Sometimes I'll say, write it as if there's no song in it, and I'll steal your best stuff. And sometimes it's that. Sometimes she has to get into my ear and what I'm feeling, and it goes back and forth, but it's never ever in a vacuum.
Hmm.
And Jeff was able to maintain what he likes to call the baby eyes, and just being able to zoom in, say, this feels well. What about if we do this? I mean, we're going through that now. We've got a very tight show. It runs, it's 2 hours plus intermission.
Hmm.
And
How much has changed since last Saturday night, if I may ask?
since last Saturday, a couple little things, and we're about to put some things into rehearsal tomorrow.
Oh,
There
wow.
are no new songs per se. There's some little tweaks. There's some lyric changes, some dialogue changes, not big ones, but clarifying ones. And what's been so heartwarming is that we haven't had to have wholesale changes. This is like, I love the metaphor of Michelangelo working on the stone, and the image is always there. You just have to chisel away everything, and that feels like where we are. That we see the beautiful face, and now we're just we're chiseling away at some of the edges of it.
How much feedback are you getting from the audiences there, and how much of an influence has that had on the creative process moving forward?
I used to joke with people that everybody has an opinion, and it's sometimes interesting to separate somebody's prescriptive thought from what the feeling was that triggered that thought.
Hmm.
And
Very
so, and so if you get enough feedback, even if it sounds like it's not talking about the same thing, but it's kind of pointing to something, then it allows us, whether it's a lyric or book-wise, for Leanne she's incredibly poetic, and I don't mean poetry. I mean, she has an incredible ability to talk about a difficult subject without ever being vulgar, and without ever, with always being respectful, and being very aware of that we're presenting people on a stage who, if it's a window or if it's a mirror for anybody in the audience, we want them to feel good about themselves. And
Carol Channing once said that for a show to succeed, you need people from all walks of life sitting in the theater. I remember calling her once, and I had performed in a country club, and it was one of the worst experiences of my life.
I've had this, not to worry.
Yes. And she said, Richard, please know they're not there to see you. They're there to see each other. And I, as an artist myself, when I'm sitting in an audience, I'm always trying to feel the vibe of the room that I'm sitting in. So at the Terrace Theater last Saturday night, the audience that came in was an audience, I would say, on the average, at least 10 years older than me.
Hmm.
And I said to my husband, I said, I can't wait to see what the response is going to be from the audience, because that wasn't necessarily and I hope you understand where I'm going with this, the demographic that I thought would be there to enjoy the show. And yet they were there. It was the audience was responding as a collective unit together. And it was just an amazing thing to be a part of and to experience the show the way that I experienced it last week.
Well, I think a couple of things about what you just said. And I'll talk about audiences in a minute, but this is a person who changed showbiz. And that's our story. If it happened, it just so happens that it encompasses all of these other things. So as we get to a commercial production, in order to reach people of all perspectives, I think that's important for us as a way to talk about the show.
Well, we haven't even touched up on that subject. We've talked about the private John Gene,
Right.
but if you want to share with the audience who John was, and I'm separating him from Gene in this instance.
I understand.
John was in the instance of his beginnings in show business and what he created. I mean, that was what always fascinated me with the titles of the shows. And I've got stories that I've heard from people who have not only seen those productions, but some of them were in those productions.
Right.
And his casting choices were not exactly the way that most casting directors would cast a show nowadays.
Right. And yet, some would. If you look at the different castings in Chicago, you might find that that's that Mr. Kenley was the template for how that show has survived all these years. It is interesting, Kenley worked for Lee Shubert in the 1920s, discovered the play The Children's Hour.
By the way, I want to get the actor's name right. Danny Rutland.
Ritigliano.
He is phenomenal.
He's great.
He's phenomenal. Just incredible role, everybody, but just incredible performance. I'm sorry, Go ahead.
No, that's all right. Danny is amazing. And by the way, Danny, I knew from my first reading that I ever did of Nightmare Alley back in 1997.
Wow.
So that's how long I've known Danny. And he's phenomenal. So he discovered all these shows and was a play reader for Shubert and really watched how Lee Shubert did business. But he did something different. He did what so many people wish could happen today, which is he brought affordable theater and stars for the price of a movie ticket to Ohio. And so when you put all of that together, I mean, it was, we try to indicate that in the opening of Act 2, what that world was like. And that might undergo a little bit of zhuzhing in terms of the intro of that. But it's close right now. It's very close. And all this stuff is close. And it's enjoyable. We're just,
and again, without not giving any spoilers, but Clea's moment on the phone with a customer just is a comic tour de force. Just
Yeah.
incredible.
That song was a challenge. And Ian and I talked many hours about the song that she sings, because we didn't want to create something that could be taken out of context and used as bashing in any way, shape, or form, and yet be true to the character. That was probably the hardest lyric to write in the show.
Mm.
And you know, writing things that seem effortless are hard. And Clea just does it so well. And even, let's see, I'm just thinking, well, the reprise of that I even adjusted yesterday, lyrically. It's been a fun challenge for me, because I've been, you know, lyric police, and I'm also orchestrating with Nathan Dame, who just had a baby boy, and so literally yesterday.
Wow.
Actually, last night.
Wow.
And so the way Nate and I work is I'm basically at my keyboard and controller here, and I create the soundscapes and I create everything, and then I have a sense of how it's going to be played here, you know, live. And then Nate and I talk about it, and he gets it all down on paper, and so we co-orchestrate everything together. And we've been working together a very long time.
Now, when Carol first reached out to me to come up and see the show, I was asked not to review the show, and I'm not a critic anyway, so I said that is not what I do. But have you gotten any reviews for this run? Are you going to get any reviews for this run if you haven't done so already? And where is the next step after June 2nd? Any possibility of it being extended, or are you locked into this time frame? Where do you go from here?
Well, in terms of Goodspeed, they're locked in. This is an amazingly well-oiled machine. I said to Donna Lynn, I don't know how she does it, because, you know, each show is another universe, and another universe of people, of delights, of problems, of challenges, of good things, you know, and it's bang, 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 bang. They've got, who's on campus right now? We've got Drude running. Our show is here in
South Pacific is coming in.
South Pacific has started rehearsing. Mm-hmm. So they've got 3 shows happening right now, in essence, and 3 casts and 3 production teams. So we don't have, I don't think there's a reality where we could extend here. We are looking at a couple of possibilities right now. You know, we were waiting to see what we had, and we're very pleased.
Well, I want to touch on something you said earlier. When this goes to the next level of commercial theater, in terms of getting this out to a wider audience, and maybe, I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse or not. What are the plans to make that happen?
What are the what to make it happen?
The plans to make that happen.
So we're inviting people up right now, and that's part of the plans. And it's, you know, we've been very careful to have a balanced team on both sides of the table. And it's important to us, you know, who the creative team is, who the producing team is, and what, you know, their goals are. At the same time, all of our goals, you know, are about commercial theater, because the more people we can share this with, the more people will entertain, and the more people, as you said earlier, might be introduced to a world they do not, which I think is kind of the point of art, and that we, you know, somehow can, you know, plant little seeds in the universe of knowledge and of joy. And you know, it's not, this isn't a piece, oh, I don't want to go see a show. I have to go learn something. It's not about that.
No.
It's not about that. It's
hopefully all theater is that. I mean, my hope is that it is.
I mean, it's why I chose sort of the golden age of musicals as a sound, and and yet the Nina May character, who's the best friend, we were able to go into R&B because that was what was authentic for her, and yet it's all got this
stops the show.
Yeah. And we've got this just nice balance of, it's not just something for everybody, but it's I grew up loving Ed Sullivan. And what was great about the Ed Sullivan Show was variety.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's what I like to hope that our show musically offers, is variety. And with that, a sense of comfort in an area that, I didn't know that, but I feel comfortable being here. So that was the intent.
How does one, if you're lucky enough to be you, how do you find your sound for the show? I know you're talking about the variety of the different sounds that we have, but how did you find the perfect sound for this story to be told?
I've been very fortunate in my life. All the different experiences that I've had have given me a pretty wide vocabulary. It's starting at, 4 or 5 years old when I grew up in the Jersey Shore, and my mom took me to see, The Sound of Music with Mary Martin. And so I got to see the shows at the height of the golden age. And I was like, I want that. And I've been writing music since I was 4 or 5 years old. It's just something I did. But then the Beatles came out, and rock and roll was a lot cooler than theater. And so I had my first band playing everything from R&B to rock and roll. By the time I was 12, by the time I was 14, I was playing in bars. And, and then I did folk music for a long time, and then that led to Foxfire on Broadway, of all things. And then that led to, I started to do corporate, because a collaborator of mine, I was in-house composer at Circle Rep in New York, and they did industrials. And an industrial, for those of you in the audience that might not know what it is, it's a corporate event where they used to create, or they still do, but not like they used to, create
I will recommend a great documentary called Bathtubs Over Broadway. Have you seen it?
I have some issues with that because they use some of my music without my permission, but
I won't push that then. Sorry about that.
Which was fine. And I'm glad that some people at least know that world existed. But in that world, I get hired to write everything from Stravinsky to hip hop. And with budgets. So my palette became really rich, because I love all styles of music as long as it's good, and as long as it's done well. And
well, I'm going to ask you, changing the subject just for a brief second. Yesterday, Apple came out with the top 100 albums. Did you see this list?
I haven't seen it. No, I've been working.
Well, go and look at the list, and then come back to me, because there are a lot of albums that I look and I go, well, I can see why that's there, but certain albums, of course, that we grew up to love are not on this list, and it's subjective. It's a group of people that neither you or I were asked to be a part of it. And I'm sure that if we were, our list would be very, very different.
Well, it's interesting. Then another hat I wear as the vice president of the Johnny Mercer Foundation, and part of our mission is to help support good songwriting. And as a matter of fact, we have 2 programs, one that's going to be at Belmont University at the end of June. It's led by Craig Carnelia, Stephen Bray, and a Nashville writer that's joining us for the first time. And so it's about the craft of songwriting. There's a difference between a great song and a great record. Sometimes they're the same, but not always.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes those lists are put together by people who don't necessarily understand the difference between a great song and a great record. And sometimes they're great records and you'll forget about it, but it's why it's called this business of show.
That's right. And I still love to listen to an album from start to finish. Just that arc that's going through there. Jonathan, I know that you're going to rehearsal right after this, aren't you?
Yeah, we've got a bit of stuff to do. Yeah.
Yes. So I want to be respectful of your time. I'm going to give my closing remarks, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. And then I've got a little clip that I want to share, and I want you to stick around because there's something I do want to ask you. But anyway, I want to thank everybody once again for being here today. If you get a chance, go up to Chester. First of all, is an incredible little town. Great shops, great restaurants. We ended up, it was very crowded on a Saturday night, but we found a spot and the service was great. The staff at Goodspeed Opera House, always the best. Every time I go to see a show, I'm treated like Dolly Levi coming back to the Harmonia Gardens. But they know how to staff their theaters. So kudos to all of them. Carol Giroux, thank you for all the work that you've done to help with this. I want to thank everybody. There have been over 1,000 of these interviews that I've done. And I want to thank everybody who has shown up, both in the hot seat with Jonathan, as Jonathan is today, and everybody who's shown up to watch these shows. Even though I'm no longer going to be doing this, all of these shows are still available on my YouTube channel. So check it out, subscribe, and go in and see, because I'm changing things around so that certain shows that were done several years ago come up to the forefront. If there's something newsworthy, I will bring up a video. So keep checking out what I'm doing there, even though I'm not going to be physically doing this anymore. I've ended all my shows with the same message. And my message is to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Everybody, when the show is over today, go to your Facebook friends list. And the fourth name that pops up, reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, but a phone call. And let that person know the impact that they've made on your life. And by doing so, you're going to make an impact on their life. I have a dear friend, Sean Moniger, and he says, we're all in the same storm, but we're in different size boats. And I always say, I don't care what size boat you're on, as long as you've got a skipper by your side. And with that, I'm going to leave the screen. And Jonathan, your closing remarks can be about anything that we spoke about today that you want to expound upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any final message that you want to leave everyone with. And again, I thank you for being here, and I'm turning it all over to you. It's yours.
Very kind of you, Richard, and I love your final remarks. I would say if you can make it up here, this is a really special cast. There was love in the room from the very beginning, and you can feel it, and you'll feel it on the stage, and you could be the first one to say, "My goodness, I got to see it there." So that would be my message about our show. And just to add to your remarks, Richard, the world can be a scary place, and lead with your heart, and you will attract others who also lead with their hearts. And that's what I recommend. I'm not sure I have more to say for you, Richard, but just thank you for having me on, and thank you for all of the work that you do and bringing all of the artists to this incredible channel and the program that you do. And thank you to Goodspeed, and thank you to my collaborators, Ian Field Stewart, Sam Salmon, and our director, Jeff Calhoun, and all of our incredible cast. So don't miss out. You've got about 10 days left to see it while it's here. And it's in a small, intimate room, and You might not get that chance in that way again.
I'm the man. He's the man who runs the show. Yes, I'm in charge. Every place I go. And the folks who kept me under will all sit and watch in wonder. I will be the brightest like the